What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the weekend preview here on Hypermark. I'm your host, as always, Adam Beadle. Glad to be with you. It has been a minute since we've done our last show. I think it was before the new year. I think it was even before the college football playoff kicked off. So it's been a long time, and a lot has happened over a very short amount of time. I had a nice little Christmas. Hope everybody had a good Christmas as well. Great New Year's. Went and go watch the Fiesta Bowl. That game between Penn State and Boise State was a whole lot of fun to watch. I knew exactly what was going to happen going into that game. I knew that Ashton Genty was going to get shut down by Penn State. I didn't really see a world where Boise State was going to win that game. I thought they put up a good fight for a while, and then Penn State just kind of started it to hand it to them, and it was what I expected. I did not expect Ashton Genty to do a lot. He didn't do really anything. Penn State took full control in that one. So, obviously, Penn State losing to Notre Dame last night, which was a heck of a great game. How about Riley Leonard just fighting through adversity last night? I thought that was a really great performance from him, and probably one of the better performances from a Notre Dame quarterback in a really, really long time. Leonard also having a better year than a lot of Notre Dame quarterbacks in what feels like a really, really, really long time, maybe even since the last time Notre Dame was in the national championship. So I'm definitely, if I had to root for anybody in this championship, whether Texas, Ohio State or not, I think I'd definitely go with the Irish. I think that it's time that Notre Dame gets their national championship win, and that they just continue the great season that they had, that they have been having. What have I been up to since I took a little vacation? I went snowboarding. I went up to Snow Bowl. Absolutely terrible conditions. The first day I went up with a group of my friends and my girlfriend. We just all went up there. It was a whole lot of fun. The first day was great. We're going on the mountain and stuff like that. Snow was absolutely terrible. It's all fake snow up there because it really has not snowed in Flagstaff. So I blame that one on Tim Roshman for not getting the snow up there in Flagstaff. We need some snow. A shout out NAU, by the way. See, this happens every time I've come to either set this up or do something. This light always goes out. I've got like a light that's like right above where the camera is, and it's like a ghost. I think it's letting me know. I don't even know. It's trying to talk to me in some way, shape, or form, like Interstellar, like something like that. By the way, great movie. I went and saw that in IMAX a couple weeks ago. Really great. I've been on this I don't know. I've been trying to test out. Anybody who knows me knows that I drink a Celsius every single day. I back when I worked for Sun Devil Source for a while, there was an on-running joke about me and my Celsius, and that I would just have this biggest smile like this. It was related to this funny photo. But I've been trying to, I don't know how to explain it, experiment with myself to see how much caffeine do I really need in a day? Do I really need this much caffeine? Because what I've been finding out is that what I would do, especially before these shows or before I call a game or whatever, is I drink a Celsius caffeine, something of that sort, and my words would just be all over the place, and I'd be very incompetent to just spit out one random thought that comes into my mouth. And that's something I think I still struggle with, as a journalist or a talk show host, is sometimes that when I'm saying things or when I've got thoughts in my head, I don't really thoroughly think them through, and then they kind of just spurt out of my mouth. And so that's something I've kind of been experimenting with. I haven't had any caffeine today, and I'm doing pretty well. I had Pan Express for lunch, which definitely helped quite a bit because it's very yummy. I've been drinking lots of water, lots of electrolytes and stuff like that. So on a jumping off the personal note and back to kind of sports and the weekend and all of that stuff. Not a lot going on this weekend. Suns play basketball. Some really good high school basketball going on tonight. I'm going to be calling Basher versus Perry, both the boys and girls game, starting at 5:30 on 88.7 The Pulse. So that should be a whole lot of fun. We get to see a Mason McGee Koa Pete battle, and also see and, we'll also get to see Bella Burkar, who's been great for Perry for a while. And then Grace Beckler, who's having an absolutely amazing season with Basha. I'm really excited to watch that game go down. And yeah, Suns as well plays just really a basketball heavy weekend. Suns play as well. Obviously, the win over the Hawks is great. Still not really sure what's going on with that team. The whole benching Bradley Beal and Yusuf Nurkic caught me by surprise, and now essentially looks like Nurkic is just kind of done with the team. I'm not mad about it. I've never been big on Nurkic. I've never been waving my hands like, oh, I thought it was really great. I thought he was a great addition when the Suns first added him to the roster. And after that point, after you kind of see him get in the rotation a little bit, and to just get out there on the floor, and I don't know. I don't feel like since he came, he wasn't the same kind of player that he is now when he originally came to Phoenix. I feel like he's changed a bit, and I don't know what that is. So I'm going to have my good friend, the one and only Jacob Salia, come and join me on in just a second here to talk about ASU's football season, talk about that double overtime loss in the Peach Bowl to Texas, which despite ASU losing, was a phenomenal game to watch. That I had a whole heck of a lot of fun watching that game. And it really it was cool to see that so many Sun Devil fans were so energetic about the team's performance. And, it's been a fun journey to follow. From something I'll mention with Jacob when we talk about it is, how different how far ASU has come since that UCLA win, since that win in Pasadena, and where they are at now. And I fully expect ASU to be right back at the top next season. Sticking on the football note, high school football, have to shout out two class of 2028 players who are coming off fantastic years and are getting recognized for Desert Edge defensive lineman Delaney George, named to the Max Preps freshman All-American first team, and Hamilton wide receiver Roy Oliver III was also named to the Max Preps freshman All-American second team. So super cool to see that those two guys are getting recognized. Those are two kids I think will likely be at the top of their class when it comes that time for them to make the college decision and to figure out that next step of life and be rated as prospects. But that is a long time coming. I don't even want to jump to the end of 2028 yet, because that's when I'll be graduating college, and I'm only a freshman right now. So I'd really just like to focus on everything that's going on right now, and then we'll get to 2028 when it comes. Which, by the way, college, this will be the last show with this bad boy here on the wall for a while, at least until we come back probably during the summer, because I'll be doing all the shows here this summer, obviously. So everybody say goodbye to the weekend preview, the good old decor here on the wall. It's been a lot of fun. But I'm gonna have my good friend Jacob Saliga join me here now on the show. We're gonna talk about ASU football, and then he's also got a little bit of an exciting announcement to talk about. Back here on the weekend preview with the one and only Jacob Saliga, here to just talk about ASU, college football, the new year, basketball. I mean, it's been 8 days since Arizona State played in the Peach Bowl, but I feel like a lot has just sort of happened just in the sports world in general, in the world in general, and over the last 8 days. But let's start, Jacob, with the Peach Bowl, kind of closing the book here on Arizona State's season. What a miraculous game from the Sun Devils. Obviously, it was the Texas defense who was really just pounding them hard for most of the game, and then all of a sudden this fourth quarter turns on. This Arizona State team gets to doing a lot of the things we have been used to seeing this Arizona State team doing for most of the season. They got Cam Scadaboo going not only on the ground but through the air. Had him throwing passes. I mean, it kind of was like a surreal, like, kind of time moment to like, oh, here's the Arizona State Sun Devils who have come a long way. And I think I'm watching this game specifically, just jumping right to the point where we see Cam Scadaboo throw that 42-yard touchdown to Malik McClain. I'm thinking, wow, how far this team has come since they won that game in Pasadena just a little over a year ago to January 1st. And Arizona State might have lost that game, but they certainly have gained a lot over the last year.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that stood out to me afterwards was just the national outpouring of just the wow, this is a team that should have been in that position, that deserved their chance at the table. Because when the playoff bracket was first announced and as the season was going on, you saw a lot of frustration from fans throughout the country as to why the Big 12 champion or the ACC champion or whomever would receive a first round bye, or just whether or not the teams who did get a bye were the most deserving. But as we saw, Arizona State, when it came to the quarterfinal round, put up the best fight out of any of the teams that played in that round. They were They were definitely much better than Boise State, who we both saw in person. They made Oregon. Oregon did not show up to the Rose Bowl. They did not look good in Georgia. Georgia just ran into a buzzsaw. That's Notre Dame, who's going to the national championship. And so, when you look at ASU and just what they were able to accomplish, it's amazing to see just how well respected, well loved this program has become, and just how insane this turnaround has been in the last, just truthfully, year.
Absolutely. And I think honestly, when I'm watching the end of the Notre Dame game, and, realizing that, Marcus Freeman, he's only in his third year as the head coach of the Irish. And you look at Kenny Dillingham, this is a guy that's only in his second year as the head coach of Arizona State. I think I kind of see a lot of similarities into where they've kind of gotten, where Marcus Freeman has gotten the Notre Dame program, and where Kenny Dillingham has gotten the Arizona State program, and how they've been able to grow these two teams in such a short amount of time, which Marcus Freeman wasn't necessarily handed the worst rock bottom situation of all time, but Notre Dame was not in the greatest place it ever has been when he was given it. And obviously Arizona State was not in the great place at all when Kenny Dillingham was given the reins for the Sun Devils. But you see how much they grow and how much those teams have gotten to the point where we're at. I don't really think that we're far away from seeing ASU get to not necessarily national championship. Maybe it is national championship. Maybe that is the next step for Arizona State, but I don't think, we will be seeing Arizona State back into the situation where they were at the end of this season very soon.
Yeah, I think what this proved to not just us, but I think what proved to everybody was next season, you enter this season, you're like, a bowl game is a definite goal. That's the expectation. Entering next year, the expectation is to get a first round bye, because your expectation is to win the Big 12 conference. Your expectation is to, hey, you were in the quarterfinal round, you got to the playoff, congratulations. Your expectation is now you don't want to just get there. You want to win a game while you're there. You want to have that substantial growth year over year. You don't want to be in a situation where 2024 is considered a blip on the radar for your program. And so I really do believe that, all things considered, when you look at who's returning, I mean, I did the math when I was writing my thing. If I'm not mistaken, we're looking at close to 17 starters.
Yeah.
17 in 2025's version of college football, where you can enter the portal,
Absolutely insane,
where you could just go get all this money, do anything you want. For ASU to enter spring, where obviously it is likely that maybe a few of those players do leave or new ones come in and vice versa, but to enter that section of the year where you may have 17 of your starters returning, including 4 on your offensive line, plus your starting quarterback and your star wide receiver, you're in as great of a position as you can be in as a program. And if you look at who is left on this staff, as far as I'm seeing so far, Matt Butterfield, who left for Ohio, is the only one so far who I've seen that's left this staff. And so when you have staff continuity, when you have roster continuity, and you have a team that's going to be hungry to exceed what they just did this year, you have the makings of an Arizona State team that, let's face it, it's going to sound crazy when I say this. We're going to get to August, Actually, no, we're going to get to July and Big 12 Media Days. We're going to have our media ballot. We're going to vote Arizona State number one. But there is a very high chance, almost an absolute guarantee, Arizona State's in the top 10, if not higher, in the preseason poll to start the season. For a program last season who was getting the wax beat off of them in Salt Lake City by Utah, getting the brakes beat off of them by Oregon at home, getting embarrassed by U of A, losing left and right, the Fresno State game, the 8 turnover game, and 3 or 4 quarterbacks or whatever it was, just everything. For
Yeah.
this program to flip the switch and
Yeah.
become a program in less than a year and a half that could be a national championship contender, that's a credit to Kenny Dillingham. And that's culture. And like
Yeah.
you said, the parallels between Marcus Freeman and Kenny Dillingham are there. They want to build a culture of winning, and it starts from the ground up, and they've built that.
I think that the even crazier thing about next year, just kind of like talking about, ASU obviously should be the Big 12 favorite going into next season. There's probably a likely chance that ASU will be a top 10 team entering next season. There's also probably a favorite that ASU is going to be one of those teams that Vegas lists as the odds to win the national championship. They might be, top 15 in odds to win the national championship. I think the even crazier thing is we're talking about a world where ASU starting quarterback Sam Leavitt is going to enter into the year with better odds and maybe a higher chance of winning the Heisman Trophy than Cam Scadaboo did, who actually finished 5th place in the Heisman race to win the Heisman Trophy.
When you look at who's returning in college football for next season, in terms of quarterbacks who could be in contention to win, it is a quarterback-driven award. There's 4 quarterbacks in college football right now that you could say to have a strong case. Nico Iamaleava from Tennessee, say that name 10 times fast because I can't. I would say Drew Aller, but Drew Aller should have had 3 interceptions on the stat sheet tonight.
Yeah, I think
I don't think Drew Aller in that offense at Penn State can win it. But then you look at the other 2. The question mark is Texas. Is Quinn Ewers going into the draft? Is he staying? If he stays, does Arch Manning leave? And so you see those 2 will have definite odds. But Sam Leavitt's going to be up there. Sam Leavitt may be top 3 in Heisman Trophy next year. And what's also more impressive is that Jordan Tyson may be the preseason favorite, if not top 3 in the odds, to win the Biletnikoff.
I agree with that, and I think that's something I've really thought on the most since January the 1st, and sort of hearing that Jordan Tyson is going to be coming back, is that I think with Jordan Tyson, not that he isn't a great receiver, because Jordan Tyson is a fantastic receiver, but I think he's going to need to have sort of the same mentality as Cam Scadaboo had coming into this season, where, okay, you're good right now. You're at that step where, we're pushing you. You're leading the team. You're doing what needs to be done. How can you elevate that? I think that should be Jordan Tyson's goal this season. And it's that is where we will see all those Biletnikoff and stuff like that come into play.
I think what'll help with Jordan Tyson in that scenario is like you saw it on the sidelines when we were in Arlington. You saw the look on his face going through pregame, throughout the game afterwards. Then whenever they showed him on TV during the quarterfinal against Texas, it was the same thing. You could tell he has that look on his face, that drive where he's like, I should be out there on this field right now dominating. I should have this opportunity. And for me, like, in the game of football, when you are around people who have that mentality and you have that mindset, you feed off of that. And you want to match that level of intensity and effort. And that could make that entire wide receiver room want to go up. I mean, think about the guys that they brought in. For example, Noble Johnson coming in from Clemson. He could be somebody who's a big impact. Malik McClain is going to be returning. The Fresno State transfer, whose name escapes me right now.
I don't think, and that's a great point you bring that up. I don't think people know how talented Jalen Moss is. I don't think people know how much of a strength he's going to add to ASU's offense next season.
and that's the thing. And plus, like that the receiving portion of the game and the tight end possession is going to be good. So whether that means Shimon Mateer, who's going to be even more locked in, who we both agree, and he even mentioned it himself post game after the Peach Bowl, he wants to improve on his hands in the offseason. He wants to be more consistent at catching. Jaden Fortier, who knows he could be getting a substantial role. AJ Law, who knows, maybe the freshman that's coming in at tight end. So there's going to be a lot of people feeding off Tyson's energy. And I think that's going to push him to want to lead by example in that room.
We've talked about the future and what it's going to look like for ASU. Let's kind of go back now and talk about this Peach Bowl game. Obviously, the one penalty that has been haunting Arizona State for most of the season, not just in the Peach Bowl, not just in the Big 12 championship, but during the regular season too, has been targeting. It has not seemed to go Arizona State's way this entire season and continues to not go Arizona State's way. What it really does feel like did not go Arizona State's way in the Peach Bowl with that hit on Melquan Stovall. Kind of, I know what my conclusion is. I really do not. I really think that it was targeting. And Jacob, I just want to know kind of your take of that situation and how you view that.
I did think it was targeting. I think the majority of America, and as social media was buzzing, you had former wrestlers like Terry McCauley, who's on the Sunday Night Football broadcast with NBC. He chimed in on Twitter saying it was a targeting. Gene Steratore, a former college ref himself, who does it with CBS, he said it was targeting. Mike Pereira, who's on Fox, like all the people you hear on Saturdays and Sundays who chime in on these networks and were big time refs doing Super Bowls, national championships, all these things all said it was targeting. Anybody who's been around the game of football says it was targeting. I feel like everybody outside the state of Texas thought it was a targeting call. But at the end of the day, my big thing on that whole situation is this. As much as I would have loved for that targeting to get called and would have loved for, it to go in Arizona State's favor, the fact of the matter is Arizona State should have never put themselves into a position in that game where they needed that type of drive, where they needed to hold on and pray for two missed field goals to get into the position and all of this. Because let's face it, as great as we want to sit here and say, like, oh, they took them to 2 overtimes, they lost by 8, it was a hell of a fourth quarter, this, that, and the other. To call a spade, the first half was terrible for Arizona State. And Arizona State was very lucky to not have been down by 3 or more scores. And so I think that's a big thing that the program is going to have to adjust to. It's like, hey, you now just played with the big boys. You see what it takes. You have to play a 4-quarter game. And what were we talking about right as before Arizona State flipped that switch to make the run to get to the conference championship? Starting to play for all 4 quarters, not just relying on one special half or one special quarter. And truthfully, that Iowa State game, even then, that was a 3-quarter game because that first quarter was not pretty for them. U of A, in all truthfulness, that U of A game may have been the only game that I can remember off the top of my head right now where I really felt like ASU put together a full 4-quarter game. And that's something that they'll need to improve upon going into the future.
That's a great point because I think you look back at U of A, yes, I completely agree. 4-quarter game. I think Wyoming game, first game of the year, you hold the team 7 points. That's a 4-quarter game.
Wyoming.
Look at the Mississippi State game. Arizona State played for the first half. In the second half, that offense was non-existent. Sam Levitt could barely throw the football, wasn't making anything happen. Even in Kansas, Arizona State struggled. That was the first time we saw the middle 8 really come into the big factor. Arizona State, they won the middle 8. And then we look at the UCF game, when ASU even struggled at times.
Saved their butts.
Yeah.
Like the UCF game, it saved their butts. Oklahoma State, I give a little bit of the caveat to because you have a 3.5-hour delay in between, the halves and everything. And so it's hard to get into a rhythm in that one. But even then, the Cincinnati game, they lost.
Kansas State.
Texas Tech, Kansas State, BYU. No, heck, even you could say that Utah game even wasn't really a true 4-quarter game because early on they did not look good in that matchup. And so I think it's a situation where that's just something that's naturally going to have to be proved upon. But overall, I just felt like as much as I want to harp on the fact that ASU set themselves up for failure with that first half, it's all credit to them. And I think the biggest thing that flipped the switch in that game, if we really want to call it what it is, was the safety by Shamari Simmons.
Yeah.
Because you had just gotten stuffed on your goal line you're heartbroken offensively. You keep getting things going. You're trying to finish and you can't finish. And the guy who should have been in for all 4 quarters, when you want to talk about targeting, the guy
Yeah.
who should have been playing the whole game, the guy who would have had the coverage on the first deep bomb that Texas had scored on, or even if we're talking about missed penalties, how about the missed blindside block on the punt return for Texas? So if we really want to call it what it is, Texas was very favorable in this game. Nevertheless, Shamari Simmons coming in was wreaking havoc from the moment he came into that game. And to get that safety, that really is what sparked it for ASU. And sure enough, the fourth quarter magic. And, I feel like that's a quarter that our generation, or even some of us a little younger than us, you're gonna be telling your kids or your grandkids about the magical run ASU went on and the magical fourth quarter comeback and all this, that, and everything.
Absolutely. All right. Last kind of thing we'll talk about for ASU, and then we'll close the story and we'll shift gears a little bit. But I just want to get from you, what is the ASU has improved so much this year. We've already talked about it so many times, but what do you think is that most important step for ASU to take this offseason?
I think the most important step has to be walking the walk, walking the walk. And what I mean by that is at a certain point, Kenny Dillingham, Graham Rossini, everybody, whether it's on the team or on the staff, can talk about, hey, we need to activate the Valley. Hey, we need to get everybody involved. We need this in NIL. We need this, that, and the other. ASU privately did a hell of a job this football season, improving NIL wise and getting things done in order to pay guys like Sam Levitt, Jordan Tyson, everybody a substantial amount of money to return as opposed to leaving and getting bigger opportunities for NIL elsewhere. And so by walking the walk, I think the Valley really needs to walk the walk now. ASU backed it up. ASU was like, hey, Kenny said it. If you invest in us, if you pour in us, we're going to be a winning team. We're going to show up on the field. We're going to do this, that, and the other. Now it's time for the Valley to return the favor.
Yeah.
It starts by continuously providing NIL funding. If the majority of the fan base chipped in, let's say, $5 a month, with the alumni network, with all these things, with how big ASU's reach is, that could be substantial. That could be huge. And then on top of that, I also think, too, it starts in the spring game when we get.
I was going to mention that.
You remember 2 years ago when they did it during Pat's run, and
it was hot.
The middle of the day,
so hot outside.
Nobody wanted to be there. It was dead. Vibe wasn't there. You get to this past year, it was a Friday night. Still wasn't really packed out like that, but there was more people. I think now the next step has to be like, hey, you look at the rest of the Big 12, you look at the amount of fans they're having show up to their, spring game events, seeing how invested they are. It's like, hey, you want to be the kingpins, you want to be this, that, and the other, show up. I'm not saying Sundale Stadium has to be packed out to the gills and it's got to be a sellout, but at least make it look like it's worth a damn. You feel me?
Absolutely. All right, switching gears, we've actually got something super exciting to talk about because I'm not going to be the only one here with a show on Hypermark. Zach isn't going to be the only one here with a show on Hypermark. Jacob is getting his show here on Hypermark called The Crossover, which is going to be super exciting. Jacob, why don't you kind of talk about it a little bit? What are we going to expect from this?
Yeah, we getting the crossover taken care of. I think the best way to describe it is we're going to be crossing over between hoops, the culture, and football, everything all into one. We really just going to be covering things from the pros to college to high school here in the state. Got that Arizona mindset, my Arizona focus on it. So, that means whether it's U of A, GCU, ASU basketball or football, whether it's chopping it up about the Suns and dear Lord, the Suns.
Jeez Louise, man.
Whether it's chopping it up about high school basketball, the scene in the state. I mean, we know how passionate I am about that. No, I am going to have my opinions on college football, NFL, you name it, but more or less like it's just a real way to kind of just cross over, you feel me? And I feel like the name is so it fits so many things. Obviously, it's got that basketball influence with the name, the
Yep.
crossover, but it's just the way that we're going to cross over different cultures, different sports. I'm crossing over from that coaching perspective into that journalistic perspective when we're talking about football and other things. And so, no, it's just gonna be exciting. We got it coming out here in a couple of weeks, the first episode. So people gotta stay tuned for that. I'm gonna be dropping more details as we get closer.
I do want to talk about that a little bit because I feel like we kind of touched on it a little bit during football season. But how does it just the coaching world and the media world? How do those kind of correlate and or help you, or maybe help you understand things a bit more from a coaches and a media perspective?
Well, I think the thing that helped with like the media perspective for myself this year was just like the knowledge of the athletes we have in the state, their schools, seeing so many of these teams. Like, for example, you know, Liberty week 1. All due respect to the rest of the media, I do up until this season, I did not feel like anybody in the state had saw Liberty more than me, knew more about Liberty than me, and had as much of a connection with Liberty as me. And so for the first game, and that's all due respect to everybody else, but when I like broke down the numbers, I'm like, man, I've been to double-digit Liberty games in 2 seasons, whole playoff runs, this that, and the other. I'm like, okay, I feel fairly confident knowing what Liberty's got going on, what to expect with them, this, that, scheme wise, and everything. And so, from that Desert Edge perspective, when we're going in prepping for the first game of the year, coming out, understanding Liberty's tendencies, understanding
Yep.
like, hey, this is who they have returning. Well, this is who they have here. This is what they got here. This player is actually playing this position now. This player is doing this. It provides a different level of like, oh, see, these are things we don't know. Whether it's understanding, what we're walking into with Donovan Dixon and Cactus Shadows, what to expect with a team like Cactus and what they have return, all these things. And so I feel like just week to week, it just allows you to get an understanding like, hey, you may have an upper hand in terms of knowledge of your opponent. And then also, too, I think just having that coach's perspective on it, I really think it helped me shift my mindset in terms of how to properly evaluate teams from that media perspective.
Hmm.
Because, from that media perspective, a lot of us, and then a lot of us in the media, we fall into that trap of we're so enamored by names, we're so enamored by players, we're so enamored by stats that we're not really watching the game. We're watching big plays. And I
Yeah.
think the thing that makes what separates you, Cody Cameron, our guy Pete, a few others, is that you guys know how to dissect the game. You guys know how to look at the game with a different lens. You're not just enamored by a name or by this is this kid's son, this is this kid's this is this kid's that. You guys do a great job of putting that perspective on the elite of the elite players and the players who fly under the radar. And I think that's where that crossover comes in, because that coaching perspective for me is like, hey, everybody may say this player right here is the best player on their team. He's doing this, this, and this. But when I get into that film room, I break things down. I'm like, well, this player over here is doing everything possible to set that up for that person. So that player is more valuable. And I feel like that's where that crossover comes in.
Totally. Totally agree. All right. Last thing for you before we get out of here. I'm going to talk about some of the top players I saw the Nike Tournament of Champions from this past weekend. But I know you were out of the Hoop Hall West, which all I saw was a whole lot of fun, a whole lot of big plays, big names making, big time things for their teams. What were some of your favorite moments from the Hoop Hall West weekend, and who were some of the top guys you watched?
Um, it did not end well for O'Connor, but that O'Connor Notre Dame game, Notre Dame top 10 in the country, O'Connor taking the top 10 team down to the wire, having a chance to win it at the end. Fortunately, Tyron Stokes, the number 1 player in the 2026 class in the entire country, game-winning steal to ice it. But that game was insane. I'd say Duncanville, De La Salle, 2 out-of-state teams. It was great to see. For me, I'm a hoops junkie. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
It's great seeing the Perrys, the Sunny Slopes, the O'Connors. That's great. I love seeing them. All due respect, I love our Arizona teams.
Right.
For me, the reason why I love hoop hall so much is that you're getting the elite of the elite from out of state coming here, and teams that you don't get to see really, and that you
Right.
don't really have an understanding of. getting the opportunity to see them was great. So, Bradley Beal, for example, he popped out on day one because his alma mater was participating in it. There was Zaza Pachulia was in the building. There was, I think I counted on my hands, there was close to 10 former or current NBA players who pulled up to Highland High School in the middle of Gilbert, which I just want to make a disclaimer to people that I'm good. I'm good. I'm good.
Oh,
I ain't going anymore east. I
you
couldn't
you had
believe.
that nice plane ride out there, didn't you? Though.
Yeah, caught the PJ caught the PJ. Richard Smith will get this joke. We caught the PJ from the Lake Pleasant Airport. We landed at, what is it, Williams Field or Falcon Field, wherever it is, Gateway. I don't know what y'all got going on out there, but
I
like,
think Mesa Gateways out there, and then you got the Chandler Municipal are your two
man,
flying locations down there. So
Man, all I know is it was far. I couldn't believe it. I looked at the map. I'm like, all right, let me see how far Skyline is from here. And it said it was 15 minutes more east. I'm like, there's 15 minutes more east of here? Like, it took me 50 minutes with no
that's how
traffic.
I feel. That's how I feel. So I live in the line between like Chandler Gilbert, and
Yeah.
I still gotta drive 30 minutes to get to Queen Creek High School.
Yeah, it's insane how spread out everything is. And, for me, I think I have a greater appreciation for people like you, Zach, and others who live in the East Valley or who are based in the East Valley, who have to travel to come see us
Oh,
on the literal other
is
end
it
of the.
big time?
I mean, it's hard to go any further than you're going to the edge, man. That's the truth.
All right. I get it. Jacob, always a blast to have you on here and chop it up, and super stoked for you and your show and what you're gonna do with that, and just excited to watch it all go down and see what happens. So once again, thanks for always joining like usual and chopping it up. Always appreciate Jacob hopping on the show and talking about ASU football, and kind of switch gears to staying on topic. I know we were talking about basketball, but go back to Arizona State talking about basketball. Sun Devils landed a big time prospect today, and 4-star center Leo Curtis, 7'1" kid from Iceland. Um, I'm sitting here at my desk just doing work, and I saw the commitment announcement. I was like, whoa, that's huge. I know he visited ASU a couple months ago, chose ASU over West Virginia and Indiana, and I think a couple others. But this commitment, especially though Curtis, has the potential to be huge for Arizona State. Imagine this. Imagine a world where the Sun Devils retain Jaden Quaintance, which all the stuff that we saw last week, just about them not doing their NIL, not fulfilling their NIL payments or anything like that. I think if something like that were to happen with this Arizona State team, we would have found it out in a completely different way in which we did, or which people were accusing ASU of not fulfilling NIL payments, but they did. And Graham Rossini affirmed that, and Bobby Hurley affirmed that. And so back to the point is that imagine a world where we've got Leo Curtis, 7'1". We've got Jaden Quaintance, who's just, the leading blocker in the NCAA as only a freshman, only 17 years old. And then you add in a possible another guy in the mix, a guy that has had ASU on his radar for a while, and ASU's had him on his radar for a while, and is narrowing down to his last final teams. He also happens to be from the state of Arizona. Imagine a world where Arizona State's basketball team next season, their Arizona State's front court next season is Koa Pete, Leo Curtis, and Jaden Quaintance. That would be absolutely insane. I think there's no doubt that then ASU would likely have the best front court in the country going into next season. Obviously, you won't have Yosan Santa, and he'll definitely be in the NBA by that point, which ASU will probably hope to have him back against Baylor on Saturday. Horrendous second half performance from ASU against Kansas. I didn't really pay attention to that game because I was with my friends. I was up in Flag, but I had it on the background because obviously I'm going to watch the game. And I'm watching the first half and I go, oh man, this is great. This is Arizona State is killing it. It's a really, really great performance from the team. and they were doing really good job at limiting Kansas from getting the best looks on the floor. I thought their defense was playing great. Alston Mason was really stepping up when he needed to and making an effort. He was probably honestly Alston Mason's probably his best game as a Sun Devil in that first half against Kansas, and then all of a sudden something happens. And I don't know how to justify Arizona State scoring 13 points in the second half. I especially with them coming off such a great performance against Colorado where they shot really, really well, and then you kind of continue that against Kansas. It caught me a little by surprise. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, did ASU just score 13 points in the second half? I don't know. I don't know how that happened. But so yeah, it was definitely a bit interesting for sure. But ASU big game against Baylor on Saturday. Like I said, very basketball heavy weekend, and I think it's a bit of a doubleheader. I think the women's team is playing Baylor at 3:30, and the men's are playing Baylor at 7:30. So I'll be out there covering the game for Hypermark. Should be an exciting game. ASU's first real Big 12 home game. I know Colorado was their first Big 12 home game, but I mean, come on, it's Colorado. It's a Pac-12. It's essentially a Pac-12 game. So real Big 12 opponent, real first Big 12 home game against Baylor. Baylor has had a great team the last couple of seasons, so that game definitely should be exciting. Staying on gears and talking about basketball, I asked Jacob what some of the star performers he saw from the Hoop Hall West tournament that he went to last weekend. I actually got to go out to Skyline High School. Shout out Tommy Eubanks and Jim Barnett for helping set that whole thing up for me. Got to PA announce a bunch of the games for the Nike Tournament of Champions at Skyline last weekend. It was a whole lot of fun. I definitely had no voice by the end of the entire thing. So I was like, by the end of the third day, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm done. But it was a whole lot of fun. Got to see a lot of great teams. I want to talk about some of the top players I saw, and I only have this out because this was like where I was keeping notes of everything I saw all weekend. So if you didn't see my story on Hypermark, I released I dropped a story about some of the top players that I saw from the weekend, some of the top performers. Wasn't all of them because I figured, I'll probably detail a little bit more all of them on here just because for most of them, I haven't really seen a lot of their play from the season. But I want to start out with the first kid I put on the list of my story in this one. That's Cole Scherer. Cole Scherer. He's a guard out of Valor Christian High School in Colorado. If I had an MVP trophy to give out for the entire tournament, I would have given to Cole Scherer. I mean, this kid, I was talking to Greg Rosenberg about him. This kid just has such a natural basketball IQ and was, really knew what he was doing, really was working with his team well. And in all honesty, if he needed to take things into his own control and move the ball around himself and do the things that needed to be done, he was going to. He averaged 34 points over the entire weekend. He had 39 points over a win against Ironwood, and which, by the way, this same time, Corey Head Holbrook for Ironwood dropped the most points out of anybody on the weekend, dropped 40 points. So that was a really impressive performance. Ironwood didn't even have their star player in that game, and Ayer Shadowvine, but Corey Head Holbrook, fantastic performance in that Valor Christian game. It went into overtime. It was the second game of the entire weekend, went into overtime. And then we didn't have, at least at Skyline, that was our first overtime game. We didn't have another overtime game until I think it was the third to last game of the weekend, went into double overtime. Volcano Vista and, oh man, I forget what the other team was, but crazy double overtime game. It was a lot of fun to watch. And I'm really glad there weren't more. I'm really glad there weren't more overtime games in the weekend because our weekend, stayed on track and actually got done, in time and doing stuff. Cole Scherer, Eastern Washington, great player. I think he's really going to help Colorado potentially win a state championship this season. Another guy I wrote about in my article was Caden Bailey from Santa Margarita Catholic. This kid's 3-point ability to shoot from beyond the arc and just his natural, I got a little hair on me, natural 3-point ability is so crisp. He had 35 points and win over Campbell Hall, which, I mean, I'm not even scared to say this. Campbell Hall, for who they have as their head coach, and some of the players they have in that team, they did not look great at all. I was not really impressed with Campbell Hall. David, I was surprised by the amount. I mean, obviously David Grace got a lot of credit for being, at the college levels and being a head coach at the college level, but I was very surprised with the how lenient the refs were being with David Grace. There was times where he would just be like way up past like half court coaching his team, and the refs wouldn't care at all. And I'm like, oh my goodness, like the box is all the way down there, and it was funny. But so anyways, Bailey, not getting a lot of college attention right now. That's what some of his teammates said, but I expect that to change. He was a great player. I thought he had a really good weekend. Volcano Vista forward Kenyon Owino. Owino just is another guy kind of like Cole Scherer, with that teammate ability to be able to share the ball, but also if he needs to, he's going to take it into his own hands. And this dude's 6'7", 205 pounds, and that's exactly his size matches up with how much of a physical presence he has on the court, and his intimidation factor in a sense that drive in the lane, put shots up, and people kind of thrown off just by how good he performs. So I thought he had a really good weekend. I thought he was one of the top performers for sure. And then one of the last guys that listed in the article was Ryan Burbach from Brophy. He had a really, really great game against Corona Centennial, dropped 37 points. I think he shot 15 to 19 from the field and like 9 of 12 from three, if that math helps up. Yeah, 27 points from three. It sounds about right. He was letting it go. And he was shooting really well the entire weekend. So I was really impressed by his performance. I was also really impressed with Dalen Sharper's performance for Brophy. Some of the other guys right here, Caspian Jones over at St. Mary's. Got to talk about the St. Mary's team. I mean, absolutely know why that this St. Mary's team is continuously at the top of Arizona every year. I know they're not having the greatest season that they have compared to the last couple of years, but between Cameron Williams, Caspian Jones, AJ Muandumba, Brody Postorino, and what they, collectively as a group were able to accomplish for the most part of the weekend, they were really great. They did play Williams Field in one of their games, I have to say. Aiden Diggs is going to be a great player. I wasn't necessarily impressed with this Williams Field team as a whole. I still think they have a lot of things to improve upon, especially as they head into conference play and just that sort of situation. I still think there's a lot for them to kind of figure out and stuff like that. Who are some of the other guys? Let's see. I'm just kind of pulling away from some of the notes I had this weekend. There were a couple other guys that stood out to me. Noah Glore for Higley was an all tournament mention. I thought he had a really great weekend. And he's another one of those team guys, another guy that can also just shoot when he needs to. I got to talk about Basha, and that kind of will lead me into talking about the Basha Perry game tonight. Is Basha actually probably the team that impressed me the most from this past weekend. And I say that because there's two freshmen on that team, and Kingston Montague and Leighton Leonard, who started the entire weekend for Basha. And I was extremely impressed. These are two guys that I knew were on the team. I hadn't really seen or heard them a lot about. And first of all, Kingston Montague, another player that can just let it go from three. And he is really skilled for how young he is. And for Leighton Leonard, only 6'4". That's what he says he's listed as. But he presents himself as he's a much bigger, much taller guy, much more physical guy as far as his reach and, coming up, grabbing boards or putting a putback bucket on offense. He definitely fits into this Basha team really well. And I think that's exactly why this Basha team is going to go far. Not just this year, but I think they've got enough to be stacked up for the next couple of years. Obviously, Mason McGee still has one more year. They got Deshaun Middlebrook from Mesquite this year. And so it's going to be really interesting to watch this team, especially in this latter half of the season, and especially tonight against Perry. I think that, Basha went neck and neck or Redondo Union in that final game of the Nike TOC. Only lost by 1 point. I mean, the opponent of the game, they had them beat. They were down by a bunch. They started climbing back. And so I think there's a lot of upside for this Basha team. And on the same page, I mean, Perry's just doing the same thing they've been doing the last 3 years, winning state championships. They're on pace to win another state championship, 14-1 on the year. Of course, their first loss this season coming in the Hoop Hall West tournament. Koa Pete still doing his thing. And man, I saw that photo of him against Tucson, and all those Tucson players are just crashing the glass, and we're just going at him. And so that really just shows you how physical Koa is, and how great of a player he is. Yeah, so a lot of basketball on deck for this weekend. Obviously, Perry Basha tonight, both boys and girls, 5:30 for the girls, 7:30 for the boys. Suns have, I think I said they had 3 games this weekend, right? They've got the game, they had a game yesterday, but they got a game tonight, a game tomorrow against the Jazz, and then a game on Sunday against the Hornets. So, we'll see what happens for the Suns. We'll see if they trade for Jimmy Butler. Might have to get my guy Hayden Silly back on the show if something happens with the Suns. If they make a trade, I think they need to. Obviously it sounds like something is not right in that locker room space. With Nurkic obviously not wanting to play, there's that right there. So, something needs to change for the Suns, 12th in the Western Conference. I think that this team has way too much talent. And I understand that injuries have kind of been an issue for the Suns team, but I just think that they have way too much talent to even be anywhere near the bottom of the Western Conference. Definitely see if they turn that around here soon. College football playoff also coming to an end. I won't have a show next week. I'm going to be in St. Louis doing some church work. So kind of talking about the college football playoffs just to wrap this whole things up. First of all, I love how the 12-team playoff has turned out. I think it's absolutely amazing. And I also love, and I think this is something that isn't talked about enough, but I love that even with all the transfers and with all this money stuff and players, being, going from place to place and doing all those things, I still love the fact that we are seeing really good football. And I think that, obviously the first few games of the beginning of the 12-team tournament in the first round, weren't the greatest football games, but I think that just shows the discrepancy of some of the teams. But I think once we got to the quarterfinals and now especially in the semifinals, I think that Ohio State and Texas tonight is going to be a really, really good game. I'm personally going to go ahead and pick the Buckeyes. I think the Buckeyes are going to get the win over Texas. I think just based off seeing how Texas struggled to, contain Cam Scadaboo at times and how they struggled, especially in ASU's passing game at times. I think that Will Howard is playing some of the best football he has ever played and probably the best football he's playing all year. Ohio State is clicking at the exact time that they need to. I think they're really hot right now. So I would be super excited to get to see a Ohio State and a Notre Dame college football playoff national championship. I think that would be a lot of fun. All right. With that being said, I'm going to go ahead and head out to Basha High School. Basha taking on Perry. Girls at 5:30, boys at 7:30. If you want to listen, you can tune on to 887 The Pulse, 887 FM. But without further ado, it's been great jumping back here this weekend. We'll be off again next weekend, but we'll be back and kicking into gear and really, soccer season approaching for Phoenix Rising. A lot to look forward to. ASU basketball kicking into Big 12 play, and obviously we'll see what happens with the Suns. So for now, as always, great to be with you. Have a fun and safe weekend. We will see everybody back here soon.